We're talking with our friend Neil Greenberg here, sports writer and stats geek, not nerd, for the Washington Post. You can follow him at @ngreenberg. All right, speaking of conversations, I think we might be getting to a little bit of a crossroads here. Your Washington Commanders just played 2 games in 5 days against 2 of the best teams in football. 2 really good defenses, plus they had a bunch of injuries. Quarterback was coming back from an injury. The offensive line had a ton of injuries. That's the context. They've now lost 2 games in a row for the first time in this season, first time in Dan Quinn's Washington tenure, first time in Jaden's NFL career. Blip on the radar or something more to see?
Well, this is now the 3rd or 4th good team that they've lost to, right? Like, they've beaten the teams that they probably should have beaten, but they lose to Tampa in the opener. That's fine. I mean, there was a lot of new stuff happening. They lose a squeaker to Baltimore, then they lose to Pittsburgh by 1, and then, like you said, the Philadelphia Eagles by another, 1-possession game. So what's happening is they're losing to good teams, and the teams they beat, the wins look worse and worse as the season goes on because those teams aren't winning, right? So it's putting Washington in a weird spot. I know a lot of the objective rankings have dropped them pretty significantly into like the 16th to 19th range, best team in the league. So they need to start to make those convincing wins happen again. Dallas obviously has some issues. I think they're 10-point favorites over Dallas right now. So they're going to have to start to impress people again, I think, and start beating teams that are considered good. They don't really have a lot of options on their schedule through no fault of their own. New Orleans, maybe. They play Philadelphia again and Atlanta. So, it's time for them to start to assert themselves. But the back-to-back losses, I think, have soured a lot of the objective metrics, meaning ones that are based on numbers alone. But I still think the team is fine. It's just we're starting to see some regression in terms of the offense, especially not humming along as it was before.
If they beat Dallas by
comfortably
4 or 5 points, does that make a difference? Or because I know for me, I don't care if they beat them by 1 point or 40 points. But
yeah,
you got to beat them by 40 points
to make sure. The trouble is Dallas will be 3-8 at that point. So
but you got to beat the people that you played, O'Neal. How about the Ravens?
No, I'm with you. I get it. And I get it. We talked this before, right? Like, this is a fraud league. If you beat the teams that you're supposed to beat, you're still considered a fraud because you haven't played anybody. And if you lose to those teams, you're considered a fraud because you can't beat them. So Washington's in a tough spot here. I think Washington just has to take care of business, beat the teams that are in front of them, and then they have a chance to show everybody what they're capable of in the playoffs, right? Like that to me is the objective of Washington. Stay healthy, make the playoffs, and then, start to assert your dominance in a way that convinces people that you were for real all along. Like, that's really the only thing they can do because, like you said, they can only play the teams in front of them.
It's just so interesting because the game to win was Pittsburgh. They gave that thing away. You had a double-digit lead in the third quarter. You got 2 turnovers. You're only able to generate 1 first down. But that Pittsburgh team looks pretty good. Like, they just beat the Ravens when they're unable to score a touchdown. I believe, and if I'm proven wrong next week, this will happen. But I believe we're at a bit of a much ado about nothing stage where I lean anyway more towards this was 2 games against 2 really good teams in 5 days than I do this ship might be sinking. But I understand because of some of like the anecdotal evidence surrounding Cliff and a rookie wall, perhaps. I understand why people have the great concern. B said like a 4 or 5 point win over Dallas. To me, it's not about the number, although that may matter for people that end up laying the points or whatever. It's about how it looks, because if they only win by 5 because Dallas in the fourth quarter scores a late touchdown to cover, I don't care, right? You just want them. What I care about, Greenberg, and I'm curious if there's a stat you look for. What I care about is offensive efficiency is about third downs, time of possession, getting back to where you were winning games and looking your best, and you can hit play action. Jaden can hit you on the edges, and the passing game is crisp.
Yeah, the offense needs to look like the well-oiled machine it was before, right? Like even in the losses, they were scoring on almost every trip to the red zone. They weren't turning the ball over. Like this offense was the talk of the town, right? And not just town locally. I mean, like the NFL at large,
the country. Yeah. Stephen
I
A.
mean, everyone was talking about the offense.
Cowherd.
Now,
right.
Now the conversation is Bo Nix the offensive rookie of the year, right? Like did he start to creep into this conversation, and maybe it's not a lock for Jaden Daniels as much as it was before. This is a very much what have you done for me lately league in all aspects. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if the defense is the final score doesn't matter to me as much as like what you said. Are they efficient on both sides of the ball? Are they able to do the things that they're supposed to do? And are they limiting the mistakes? Right? Because like that's the stuff that transfers from week to week. So that's really what I'm looking for. I think they'll be fine against Dallas. I think they'll be fine this season. I just think it's going to come down to, once they make the playoffs, and I still think they'll be a playoff team, how do they look in that first playoff game? And then, what's the conversation then? That to me is really what matters. The regular season, playing who they play, everyone's in a similar situation. You play who's in front of you, and you're just trying to make it to the postseason healthy.
Mm-hmm. Totally. It's just remarkable. You know what? This defense has been really good for 3 quarters in 2 straight games. And then I think the offensive efficiency kills them late in those games.
Yep.
It's just like you mentioned this Bo Nix thing, and there's just such a rush to judgment on all things in the NFL. And I've watched a little bit of Broncos. Like I have some friends on that staff, and I don't know. If there's a question about who's better, I think it's asinine, but that's fine. Everybody's allowed to do what they want. Denver's playing good football though, and I think here's where I would delineate between Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. I think Denver's playing some good football, and Nix is a part of that. I think Washington, granted they're on a 2-game slump, but Washington, over the course of this season, through 11 games, has played some really good football, and I think Jaden Daniels is the reason, right? Like,
yes.
What does Barkley say? There's bus drivers and bus riders or something. Like right now, Daniels is driving, and I think Nix, on some level, as much as a quarterback can, is riding.
Right, and like for me, it's no contest. I think Jaden Daniels is the offensive rookie of the year 10 times out of 10. The fact that there's a conversation now that we're having, I think, is what's interesting to me. But
you know what's crazy, dude? Is it's kind of like the rhetoric of sports conversation is. I feel like most people are like, oh, well, it's Daniels, but now it's a conversation. Like it's a conversation because we're making it one.
Yeah.
And maybe Denver's play
has
14-6 is legit. You're right.
Him.
Yeah.
So I think that he's played his way into the conversation. I think there's a huge gap between the two. Personally, I think that he's in the conversation only because there was no one in the conversation for weeks, right? Because Jaden Daniels was winning offensive rookie of the year for the week. He was on a team that was absolutely dominating on offense, historical efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. So like the gap to me is just narrowed, and now there's someone else to talk about. I don't necessarily think that it's a race, but I think that it's now a conversation that someone at the very least is now threatening in some way where I didn't think that was happening before. I think Jaden Daniels is a fringe MVP candidate. I don't think Bo Nix is anywhere close to that. So I think that we're kind of talking in shades of gray here. So yeah, I agree with you. I think Jaden Daniels is the offensive rookie of the year. I think Bo Nix has a chance to at least, get himself more in the conversation depending on what happens. But again, this is a very much what have you done for me lately? And, people like to talk about the hot thing.
Yeah, for sure.
We let the people who like to start get too big.
Talking with Neil Greenberg here from the Washington Post. You can check out his work at N Greenberg or over at the Washington Post. We're going to do them a little later in the program, but we might as well get this part of the session over with. You do your own power rankings, which I applaud. You actually do your own homework. I like that. Where do you have the old Washington Commanders?
I have them 19th.
Damn,
They've fallen
that's
down
a fall.
to 19th.
I feel 2 weeks ago,
they are now the
I think you had them top 10
in the NFL. Yeah, I have them because the wins aren't looking as good, and they got a couple losses, and I'm pretty sure I'm close because I have the Dallas game as like minus 9.5, and I think the actual line is minus 10.5. So I think I'm pretty close to where the other objective rankings are, including odds makers. Their record's going to have them more at the top for the subjective rankings, but I think right now they're probably closer to the bottom than they are the top.
What? All right, so the three of us can run through this. Who do we consider the good teams? I think the real Super Bowl, the top teams are Lions, Chiefs, Bills. And then I'd have a tier below that.
Well, that's fair.
Go ahead.
I think it's the Lions and Bills, and then I have it as a gap to like the Eagles, Ravens, Vikings, 49ers, Packers, and then another gap with like Chiefs.
You think the Chiefs are behind all those teams?
I do, only because their 9-1 record. You look at their score differential; they probably should have 6 or 7 wins. I don't think Patrick Mahomes has played really great.
See, that's the problem, though. If he hadn't played great and it's 9-1,
sure,
you got to worry about him waking up.
You're absolutely right. And again, this is numbers driven. This isn't me, my feelings in it. Would I bet against Mahomes and the Chiefs? Never, not in a million years. But my power rankings have it as like 2 very good teams, and then just like a glut of teams in the second and third tier, which you can rank probably any way you want, and I wouldn't be able to have an argument. But I think Detroit has shown to be the best team in the league right now.
Yeah,
I think Buffalo is certainly there as well. The Eagles have a miraculous turnaround after their 2-2 start. They're playing really great football. And I think the Ravens are, they're one of the most balanced, solid teams that we have, and I think that they're also near the top.
How do you reconcile? Excuse me. I think you had the Niners somewhere in your top 10.
6.
They're now 6th. You have them 6th.
Yeah.
They're 5-5.
Yeah.
And I mean, not only outside of the playoffs looking in,
injuries.
They're 1-3 in the division.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm crazy.
I'm not saying that. I understand that people believe there's a lot of talent, and maybe they'll get hot down the stretch here. There's still 6 games to play, or I guess they have 7. I am fully cognizant that there's a lot of football left and that's a talented squad. Mm-hmm. But, like, when is your break point for, I don't want to say preconceived notions, but you go into the season thinking San Fran's going to be damn good, and that kind of impacts it, right? And
it does, yeah. Not as much now as it did, let's say, like in week 3. It's mostly, yeah. I mean, this isn't an exact science, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't know, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm sure I'm wrong about. Like, there's a lot of stuff I'm sure that I'm wrong about all the ratings I have, just because there's just a lot of stuff that we don't know. But when you look at like how good the 49ers are versus expectations, both on offense and defense, they're the 6th best team in the league in terms of scoring more points than expected and saving more points than expected on defense. So that's ultimately what's keeping them relatively high. I mean, they're a good football team with some losses. But
that loss last week is just unforgivable.
Well, it is, yeah. But again, I mean, it's my ratings aren't going to be volatile one week to the next based on one game. Like, what would push the needle the most is obviously injuries and future outlook, but also, current performance relative to what we've seen in the past. Outliers aren't going to move it all that much. So yeah, I think San Francisco is still a good team. Can I definitively say they're the sixth best team in the league? No, but do I think that they're top 10? I think so. Do I think that they're in like that second to third tier of contenders? I absolutely do.
It's gonna be fascinating, man. Down the stretch we come. This league never ever seems to disappoint, man. Thank you for the time, Neil, as always, buddy.